Hey guys, this is Brandon, and welcome back to my DevLog series. So after creating the hammer spell last time, I wanted to take a break from spells and focus on something a little bit different. So I added two test NPCs into the game because I decided to add a dialogue system into the game. I've never made a dialogue system before, so I was kind of excited to take a crack at it. So I'll quickly show you how it works. When you get close enough to an NPC, this little world canvas will show up and just kind of show you, you can talk to this guy. I can load in as many paragraphs of dialogue into each individual NPC that I want. So for example, here would be the first conversation. Hey, you, get off my flowers. And then that's the end of that conversation. Now, if I talk to this person again, seriously, just kidding, the creator hasn't added any flowers because he's lame. That's the end of that one. And if I talk again, if you see him, could you ask him to add some to the game? Bring some life in here. And last time. And apparently, even though I'm chatty and have so much more to say, I've been programmed to end my conversation here. Lovely, just lovely. So what I mean is, if I talk to her again now, it's just going to repeat that last conversation over and over. I don't want to force the player to have to sit there and skip through a whole bunch of dialogue if they're not interested in it, so I'll break up all conversations into chunks like this. So just to give you an idea of how this works, I'll add a third NPC into the game right now. Now, in order for the dialogue manager to know that you want to have a conversation in here, we need to add a trigger around the NPC. And sure, that looks fine. So as soon as the character walks inside this sphere, then you will be able to talk to this person. And next, I just need to add the talkable NPC script that I created on there. So there we go. So now I will click and drag text into this script here. So I'll show you what I mean. This dialogue system is made up of 3 different scripts here. Here is the first one. I think this might just be the shortest script I've ever created. And all this is basically a base class for the actual text that I will have the NPC say. But this little line of code here, this is what I wanted to show because this is really, really cool. This allows me to, I can just right click anywhere in my project, create dialogue right there. So I'll just fill in some text. So there's the first one, and I'll go ahead and add one more conversation onto this test NPC. Okay, so there's our text created. We'll go ahead and drag that text onto this script. And there we go. What's up? Am I being featured in your video? That's really cool. So because I added 2 conversations onto him, now it's always the last conversation that's going to be repeated over and over. So now this time, so like I just repeat this line over and over again, but I want to talk more. So again, I could have an NPC in here that has like a dozen different conversations on there that the player could read through if they really wanted to. But I'll break them up into chunks this way so that if people that aren't really interested in talking to people and they just want to actually play the game, that way they won't be forced to sit through dozens and dozens and dozens of lines before they can actually leave again. So that's why I decided to do it this way. Essentially, all of the text is placed onto this dialog box object in here. I've just got name test in here, but whatever name I have right here, that will replace this text here, and here's the actual script text. That'll be replaced with all of this one line at a time. This dialogue manager script here, this is where all the actual magic has happened. This is where, this is the script that controls how all of the text is displayed. And the one part that I initially did not know how to handle is to actually make each individual letter in the conversation kind of get typed out one at a time like this. I had no idea how to do that initially. So I did a little bit of research, and all that magic happens in this loop right here. Basically, this paragraph here, this is the, this would be one of the paragraphs here. So this line of code here finds each individual character within that paragraph and turns it into an array, and then we iterate through that over and over and over and just display one letter at a time. So that's how that was handled. So yeah, aesthetically, this this leaves a lot to be desired. Like you can even see this arrow here. It's really, I think it's like 40 by 40 pixels, so it's way too small to be useful here. This is just the default font that came with Unity. So aesthetically, this leaves a whole lot to be desired, but in terms of feature-wise, how it works, I'm really happy with it. So it's 12:37 in the morning. I'm feeling kind of cranky and kind of happy at the same time. I'm crankapy. The reason the reason that I'm feeling this way is because I've been working on the same problem for so many hours today. It's not even funny. However, I did finally find a solution to my problem. You'll notice that this is not my actual game here. This is a test project that I set up, which is what I do when I'm at my wit's end. I'm working on a new spell now, and it's another projectile spell, so I decided to try to tackle my aiming problem. This is something that I've been putting off because I knew it was going to be difficult. So you can see here, and I'm drawing a ray so that you can see just exactly where the projectile is going. You can see that it's supposed to go to the mouse pointer, and it's freaking close, but it's not quite going to the mouse pointer exactly. There's a slight offset. Now you'll notice when I'm aiming directly above or directly below the player, it's pretty well perfect. The reason for this, in a 2D game, this would not be an issue because there's no depth in 2D, but this is a 3D game. So in 3D, there's no way for your game engine to know exactly where you're clicking because there's depth in a 3D world. So in order to determine where you're clicking exactly, you draw a ray from your camera down to a collision to where you click. So if I click on my player right here, a ray will be drawn from my camera down to his feet there. Now, that would not be a problem if my game was 100% top down. If the rotation was 90 degrees on the x-axis, it would go perfect every single time because it's pointing exactly straight down and there's never going to be any kind of deviation. But you can see my rotation that I set is at 53.78 degrees in the x-axis. So this is not perfectly top down. So because of that angle there, there's kind of an offset that's happening, and I cannot, for the life of me, I'm not good enough at vector math or trigonometry. I don't know how to calculate that difference using math. So what I decided to do instead is to create a giant flat plane in my game world, and put it right at the tip of the player's wand, which is where the spells are going to spawn out. This plane will obviously be invisible in the game world, but collisions with the ray from the camera will register with this. So now you can see it's not my top down, it's at my preferred settings here, but it is aiming to the mouse pointer exactly perfectly. So I'm happy that I figured this out, and I'm cranky that it took me so many painstaking hours to figure out this solution. I wish I knew how to do the math for it, and maybe I'll learn, but this is the solution I'm going to stick with for now. So after the dialogue system, since I had gotten my aiming perfected, it was now time to work on my next spell, which I'm calling the Crystal Grapple spell. This has a lot of functionality, so I'll just show it to you in parts. Basically, the way I'm thinking right now is every spell in the game is going to have two different variations, one for when you just click and one for when you hold the mouse button down and charge the spell up, and then it'll have kind of more powerful functionality. So here's just a normal click. And ignore the fact that he went flying. When you hit an enemy, it's going to immobilize them temporarily, but these guys are not moving right now, so I'm going to add that functionality sometime in the future and then make sure that the immobilize part is working. But yeah, so this is just a single click. It's just kind of a normal attack. And then you've got the actual grapple behavior. So you charge it up, hit an enemy with it, and you get reeled in and do some damage to them. Now, the part about this spell that I really like is there's some additional functionality. So, like this chasm right here, you would not be able to cross this with your dash spell, but with the grapple spell, if there's an enemy over there, you can latch on and fly over there. And now I'm trapped here and I can't get back. So the first thing that I wasn't sure how to do was to actually make the chain look like a chain. So here is the super realistic high def chain that I drew in GIMP. I kept it simple because I need it to be tileable. So to show you what I mean by it being tileable, here is my grapple that I made. It's supposed to be kind of a slightly transparent crystal looking material, and I could definitely do better with this, but I'm fine with it for now. But for the regular grapple, I added a trail renderer to it and added the chain to it. So essentially now there's going to be a trail that follows it everywhere. So when I move it, the chain is just going to follow it up to a certain distance. I went with the trail renderer for the regular non-charged version of the spell just because it doesn't need to stay attached to anything. If I move around, it's just kind of being spawned in there. So all it needs to do is follow the grapple and that's it. So nothing complicated going on there. Now the charged grapple is a little bit different because it needs to stay attached to both the grapple game object as well as my wand. So you see that if I move around with the charged version, it'll still stick to the end of my wand even when I'm looking around and whatnot. So to handle that for the charged grapple game object, instead of using a trail renderer, I used a line renderer instead. I can add as many points on the line as I want to, and I'll basically just, I only set it up as having 2 points, just A to B, the wand tip to the end of the grapple, and I set the position of these lines, or these points on the line with code so that it always stays attached to the end of the wand. So yeah, the complicated part about this code was probably actually reeling in the character towards the chain. That's the part that took the most tweaking. So I use the physics system in Unity to detect whether damage is being done to my player or not. So in order for the player to not get damaged when they get reeled in towards an enemy, I actually use code to turn off physics collisions between the player and the enemy. I invoke a slight time delay here. So I use this here just to create a slight delay before you actually start getting reeled in. We turn off gravity on the character, make sure that we play the actual animation for the character getting reeled in. And I actually reused the player dash animation for this because I thought it worked really, really well. You can see, I know it's pixely when I zoom in here, but you know, he's kind of leaning forward, his hat's flying all over the place. I thought it worked pretty well for this spell. Make sure that the player rotates towards the direction of the grapple so that even if you're facing the opposite direction, this will force you to snap towards that direction so it doesn't look weird. Change the state of the player to is dashing, just so that I've got states that check what the player is doing so that there are certain states where you cannot move with the keyboard. So this says if you're dashing, you will not be able to move. So once you're being reeled in, you're kind of you're not going to be able to move until the character reel in is done. Then we actually move the player using a vector3.lerp, which is just a linear interpolation of movement. So we just pass in the player start point, pass in the player destination, and this time variable to tell it how long it'll be before the character actually gets reeled in. This little snippet here checks to see if there are any collisions between the player and the enemy, and because I actually turned off physics layers between the player and the enemy, I need to use this here to detect whether the player has collided with the enemy, because in this instance, with the Grapple spell, you're actually going to be damaging the enemy. And once the player has damaged the enemy, then we start resetting everything. So we set our play state back to nothing, stop the animation for the dash, turn gravity back on, and then I actually start the coroutine for the player becoming invincible just for a short amount of time, just to make, because the player is actually going to be colliding with an enemy. I want to make sure that you're invincible for just a very slight amount of time to make sure that this spell doesn't end up backfiring on you. And then I turn the physics collisions back on between the player and the enemy. So yeah, the only other thing to note is the reel back after max distance. All that does is determine how far away the grapple is from the player, and once it's at the max distance, it'll get reeled back in. Because with this spell, I don't let you start charging the spell up again until it's returned to you. Like if I try clicking, nothing's going to happen until it returns to you. So yeah, like I said, this spell is just about done, except for the actual just regular single click. It's not immobilizing the enemy yet. And in order to do that, I need to have the enemies actually moving around the world and trying to attack the player. So I need to actually give them some AI. So while that's one of the last things on my list that's been really, really intimidating me, I think that's what I need to work on next. So I think the next thing I'm going to work on is creating a brand new enemy. I just kind of want to do the whole thing from scratch, just model out a brand new enemy, animate them, rig them, give them a texture, and then bring them into Unity and code out their AI so that they actually start attacking me. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.